You're watching France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news headlines. Biden's Super Tuesday gathers pace. The former vice president picks up vital endorsements from contenders who've dropped out of the race to be Democrat presidential nominee. Bernie Sanders, though, still going strong. We've got analysis with Armand Georgian to come. Coronavirus cases continue to rise. 3,000 dead, 90,000 infected worldwide. The majority are in China, but Italy is now the largest infection zone outside Chinese borders. France has registered a fourth death. Spain, its first fatality linked to the pandemic. Netanyahu declares victory as partial results say he's in the lead, but Israel's third election in 12 months is unlikely to deliver a workable majority to anybody. The stalemate continues in Jerusalem. Thank you very much for being with us. Tonight's the night when the Democratic Party may have the answer to its question. That question is, who will be the candidate to take on Donald Trump in November's US presidential election? The news so far this Super Tuesday is good for Joe Biden. Contenders have dropped out and pledged their support to the man who, of course, was vice president to Barack Obama. Biden now looks to have made up some of that ground lost early on to other contenders, notably to Bernie Sanders. 5 contenders are left then: Sanders, Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Michael Bloomberg and Tulsi Gabbard. Super Tuesday is so called because 14 states will be voting and the results could prove decisive. Our international affairs editor, Armand Georgian, joins us for more on this one. Armand, a very good evening to you.
Good evening, Mark.
Would it be presumptuous to say we're now looking at a 2-horse race, Sanders versus Biden?
It's a little bit early to say that, but as you said in your introduction, Biden's campaign is gathering momentum after a better than expected result in South Carolina. And he's actually not doing too badly on the delegate count as well, because remember, the way that a Democrat becomes the nominee is by winning a certain number of delegates. So what we have to watch all the time is the delegate count for each candidate. Sanders still ahead on 60 delegates. Biden, though, not far behind, 53 delegates, and it will be interesting to see whether that support that he's now got from Pete Buttigieg, who dropped out of the race, whether that has an impact, because Buttigieg was actually third in the delegate count. So if Buttigieg's supporters do what they've been asked to do, which is to switch their support for Biden, that could further boost support for Biden and give him more delegates. So Biden, yes, he is kind of emerging as the centrist challenger to Bernie Sanders. And meanwhile, if you look at the more left-wing part of the Democratic Party, that vote is still split between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, although she is pretty far behind in the delegate count at the moment. But we'll have to see. We can't count her out, Mark. She needs a good performance in California and Texas. If she gets that, she could be back in this game. One other candidate that you mentioned in the introduction, Mike Bloomberg. This is really make or break for him. He needs to make the 15% threshold for delegates, particularly in California and Texas, which are these delegate-rich states. Otherwise, really, we could see him fizzling out pretty quickly if he doesn't make that.
Indeed. I understand he's targeted lots of states this Super Tuesday with his massive budget, of course. He's richer than Donald Trump, just to sort of drop that one in, of course, which maybe goes to show that you can't buy success in Democratic politics, but maybe we'll have a different answer in 24 hours' time. Who knows? So let's come to that, Armin. When do we expect to know when the results are? When do you expect to have the results? When will we be sitting here saying this is what happened and why it happened?
Well, I think we should have a clearer picture once we get the results from California, because that is considered the jewel in the crown of Super Tuesday. Now, California reports, I'm told, around 5 o'clock in the morning, Paris time. But who knows if there's a delay? Maybe we won't get that big picture until after 5 in the morning Paris time. The other thing to watch for, is any possible technical glitches, Mark, because there have been some reports of such glitches in Texas, in some polling stations, and of course we all still remember that sort of meltdown in the Democratic caucus in Iowa when the voting app didn't work. Now, obviously, the party's been trying to iron out such problems, but you can never completely exclude them in such a large-scale voting exercise as Super Tuesday, with 14 states voting and 1 US territory. So there could be quite a long night of drama ahead, Mark.
Indeed, and who better to guide us through it than you, sir? Thank you very much indeed. Armin Georgian, our international affairs editor, with the analysis. And this is a night when we need that kind of analysis. Armin, thank you, sir, for being with us, and courage
Merci
for
beaucoup.
you throughout the night. Full coverage, of course, here on France 24 of all the developments on Super Tuesday as they happen. Next, there are a number of developments on the coronavirus outbreak. Over 3,000 people now are dead, 90,000 infected. These are worldwide figures. Doctors say the virus is slowing down at its epicenter in Wuhan, in China's Hubei province. In Italy, the cordon around the cluster of towns in the north is being reinforced. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has tested negative. His Holiness had a cold, or rather has a cold, and this is a quotation from the Vatican doctors, without symptoms related to other pathologies. Italy is now the second largest source of the virus outside China. 523 cases there, 79 people so far have died in Italy. Our report looks at previous epidemics that have raised alarm across the world.
With new cases of COVID-19 now decreasing in China, experts say there is reason to hope that the strict quarantine measures taken there may be the way out. Which brings us to the first possible scenario. COVID-19 is contained by strict public health measures, including quarantine and isolation of those infected with the virus. That's what happened with the SARS epidemic in 2002 and 2003. The virus, a close cousin to COVID-19, infected some 8,000 people worldwide and caused 800 deaths. Within a matter of months, public health measures contained and effectively stamped out the virus. Experts hope that's what's happening now in China.
The recommended actions are to isolate the cases when they are identified, give masks to those who may be infected, etc.
A second possible scenario: a treatment or vaccine prevents the virus from spreading. Scientists are working on this now. They have to isolate the virus and perform a series of clinical tests, including tests on animals before treating humans, a process that could take a year to a year and a half. A third scenario: the virus doesn't go away. It spreads so widely that it becomes a fact of life and part of the cycle of regular flu season. This is what happened with the H1N1 outbreak, or swine flu, in 2009. That virus infected 20% of the world's population, or some 60 million people. Although it had a much lower death rate than SARS or MERS, it was responsible for killing as many as 575,000 people in its first year.
9 civilians are confirmed killed by airstrikes in Syria's Idlib province. The airstrikes were carried out by Bashar al-Assad's air force, supported by their Russian allies. They purported to target rebels who are present in the province, supported by Turkey. And in other developments, Turkey shot down a Syrian fighter jet in Idlib province on Tuesday, marking the third such incident in as many days.
Al-Bara in southern Idlib, the town a target for airstrikes carried out by the Syrian regime. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, several civilians were killed. In Al-Fuwa, members of the Syrian Civil Defense, better known as the White Helmets, search for survivors.
There are no factions, nor soldiers, or anyone. These are all civilian houses. There are 18 injured people and 2 men are so far missing, and we can't find them. Everyone here is a civilian, and their houses have been destroyed.
As the UN steps up aid efforts, officials visited the Turkish border to see firsthand the impact of the fighting on those who've been forced to flee.
This is not something that just happened. This is not happenstance. This is something that is planned by the Assad regime. It's brutal. It's unexcusable, and we must ask for an immediate ceasefire with the Russian and the Assad regime.
On a visit to Paris, the leader of the Syrian White Helmets is trying to build support for a no-fly zone over Idlib.
If the international community doesn't respond and address the humanitarian crisis, I believe that everyone will pay the price. That is why the international community must act very quickly and put into place emergency plans, not only to protect civilians, but also to rescue them.
Since December, when the fighting intensified in Idlib province, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 470 civilians have been killed, while nearly 1 million people have been displaced, according to the UN.
Thousands of migrants and refugees are searching for ways to cross Greece's border with Turkey. The Greek government has increased its crisis call to the EU for help to seal off its eastern land and sea frontiers. Turkey has made good on its threat to open its borders to those seeking to cross into Europe.
Pledging support to Greece, top EU officials visit the Greek-Turkish border, where tensions are running high after Turkey said last week it would no longer block migrants from crossing into Europe. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen promised to hand Greece 700 million euros in assistance, half of it available immediately.
Those who seek to test Europe's unity will be disappointed. We will hold the line, and our unity will prevail. Turkey is not an enemy, and people are not just means to reach a goal.
Brussels is insisting Ankara should abide by its 2016 deal with the EU to stop migrants entering the bloc in exchange for 6 billion euros. Several thousand migrants have rushed to the Greek border in recent days, following Turkey's announcement. There they faced tear gas and stun grenades fired at them by Greek police. Some migrants who made it across described beatings or having their belongings taken by authorities.
We got across twice, but were sent back. They took everything, phone, money. They swore at us, took my shoes, took everything, and sent us back.
Rights groups have accused Turkey of using the migrants as bargaining chips, whilst criticising the EU for failing to provide greater assistance.
And we're watching for all developments on that story. Next, partial results show that the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is in the lead in Israel's third national election in less than a year. Once again, though, there's no governing majority in sight. Netanyahu's claiming victory in Monday's vote over his main challenger, the former Armed Forces Chief Benny Gantz of the centrist Blue and White Party, after the exit polls projected the Conservative leader's Likud party had come out on top.
It's still unclear whether Benjamin Netanyahu will amass the 61 parliamentary seats needed to continue his premiership. But Likud party supporters in Tel Aviv are already celebrating.
Unbelievable. We couldn't expect better. We are so happy.
Exit polls indicate the Israeli prime minister holds a solid edge over his main rival in the country's third election in under a year. In Jerusalem, his supporters are enthusiastic the country's political deadlock could be over.
We are very happy this morning to wake up to a result that says that Benjamin Netanyahu can form the next government. We wish him the best of luck, and we hope that he will keep all of his promises.
For rival Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party, this election marks a devastating setback. It had hoped to end Netanyahu's over a decade in power. Gantz supporters expressed dismay that so many voters continue to trust Netanyahu.
I'm very disappointed. In fact, I'm pretty surprised that half of the country is interested in somebody who has criminal charges against him being the prime minister of the country. Israel has been through difficult times, and I hope it'll get through this difficult time, too.
It's all celebrations for members of the joint list of Arab parties. The alliance is predicted to take 15 seats, its highest number ever, and plans to wield its power.
We will block Netanyahu from forming a government.
Netanyahu has vowed to immediately begin forming a new coalition, a feat he has already failed at twice.
Those are the main stories. For more, stay with us. You're watching France 24.